Right, good afternoon. My name is Jonathan Proctor. I work at King's College London. I work in the public sector, higher education. So this presentation is going to be a lot easier now. I've got my notes. It's all about Windows 10, keeping up to date. We're specifically around the servicing, the branches of Windows 10. Now, I've also included my Twitter handle, my blog. I do a lot of retweeting of other MVPs. I use it predominantly just to find out what's going on and keep a reading record. So I refer back to it. It's very quick to retweet, like something, and then come back to it later. And the reason I make a point of saying that is I've interviewed quite a number of people over the last year to join my team. And one of the questions I asked them is, how do you keep up to date? And the default answer is TechNet. And that's pretty much where the answer ends. And I'm like, if you're on Twitter, you can find out things in almost real time. There's a conversation that starts. So if you're not on Twitter, definitely get on Twitter. But the agenda today for the presentation, we're going to be looking at upgrading Windows 10. What are your options, especially in the enterprise? We're going to look at a few customizations that are available in the public space, but also some customizations that I've put together. I'm going to look at baselines in SCCM or Config Manager, and how I've been using them. And finally, a little bit on reporting and the Power BI report that I've put together. So, Windows 10, enterprise upgrading options. We have obviously two main options in the enterprise. We have the in-place upgrade task sequence, but we've also got the servicing node within Config Manager. So, if I was to ask everyone to put their hands up, who here is using an in-place upgrade task sequence to get to the next branch of Windows 10? A lot of hands going up. And who here is using servicing? Okay, it's quite an even split there. That's quite interesting. A lot of people I've spoken to are using in-place upgrade task sequences. Now, I normally ask people, if they are using in-place upgrade task sequences, why are they using them? So they normally come back with answers like, it's all the additional steps I want to do. I want to do the BIOS update. I want to update applications, drivers. I might want to clear profiles, sort out registry keys or apply registry keys, in addition to the actual primary goal of upgrading the branch. Now, adding all those additional tasks adds all additional complexity and time it takes to actually upgrade to the next branch. But if you are using task sequences, I've made a note of a couple of bloggers here, OneVim and SMS Agent. Now they're using some, they've got some really cool tools that are out there. The top one by OneVim is a wrapper. It's a GUI interface for the user. So the user can see the branding. Actually, now what I'll do, if I just, hopefully we can go back. I'm just going to load up some PowerShell. So here, I've created a custom wrapper for the user. I've actually put I could put my company logo on there. I've actually just put the WMUG image. It's telling the user what it is. It's giving them a little description, how long you expect it to take. There's a little read more about it link, because it can refer back to your internet pages. It also provides a device name, because not every user knows what their device is called, especially if they're contacting service desk. And as part of this wrapper, it's all configurable by an XML file. So you can set the number of days before the upgrade becomes mandatory. At this point, it's self-service. But after those 28 days that I'm referring to on screen, it would become a mandatory deployment. The user could just click Upgrade Now, but they could click Schedule. And they could schedule it for the evening, and they could schedule it from a week from now at a particular time that's convenient to them. And what this will do is it will create a scheduled task, and then that scheduled task at the time that's specified will run the task sequence. Now, OneVim, I really like the blog, I really like the tool. And it's a great way of communicating your message to the user and also getting the user to participate in the upgrade. The other blog that I've mentioned on here, SMS Agent Host, I can find the right script. He's making use of the user experience that a lot of users will have on their personal devices. So it's the right colors, it's the right fonts. It's part of this curtain that's being wrapped around the upgrade process. We can have secondary messages to the user. And then it will follow into getting the windows upgraded. It's going to have a little wheel turning. It's an experience that users are expecting from their personal devices. From an admin's point of view, you are controlling the desktop at this point. They can't do anything else. The latest version of this has a progress bar. You can put in a password, so only local admins can control it. So those are two blogs that I definitely would advise you to check out. The second blog, the SMS Agent Host, also has the addition of feedback for compatibility scan errors. So if there's an error in the compatibility scan or there's an error in the task sequence that you're deploying, instead of it just erroring out, it can actually produce a little box for the user. It will give the error code. It will also translate that error code into a useful message. So when the user contacts the help desk, it will say things like, there wasn't enough disk space, or this error, this application stopped it from upgrading. There's more information rather than my upgrade just failed. So the media that you're using, if you're building your machines, bare metal builds, or using your in-place upgrade task sequences, the media, the actual ISO media, you need to keep that up to date. And there's a great blog here, OS Deploy, by David Segura, if I'm saying his name correctly. He's produced a number of PowerShell command lines. So literally just a couple of command lines, it will mount the media, it will download the latest community updates, servicing stack updates. It will apply JSON file, it can customize applications within the media. And then it can write it all out to a build. It can write it out to an ISO. So that's osdeploy.com. Now, when I was looking at this, I was also looking at WMUG that you might have heard about. That GUI is basically a GUI tool wrapped around the OS deploy scripts. So those are two to definitely check out. But in addition to the OS media and keeping the OS media up to date, OS deploy has also got an OS config package. And as you can see on the screen here, the idea behind the OS config package is to do all the post-operating system customizations. So these are things like the application association file, the background, the wallpapers that you might want on the image. You might want to apply policies straight away, not wait for group policies to come down. Custom scripts. You might have a whole host of custom scripts that you need to run. Start menu layouts, themes. It backs up the registry before and at the end. Great tool. Before I discovered this, we had quite a number of steps in our task sequence. Now we just have one step in the task sequence that refers to this package. When you download the package from osconfig, you simply run the osconfig ps1 file. And what it will do is it will take the whole directory and copy it to the C program data osconfig folder, and then it's run locally on the machine. The way this works is when you run osconfig, not only will it copy it to the program data folder, but it will look in each folder and look for PowerShell commands, PowerShell files. So it will run through each folder in turn, looking for any PowerShell command, and then run it. And the way David's created these scripts, all of these scripts will log out to program data OS deploy. So you've got a reference to go back to in case it didn't apply that start menu layout and you want to know why the logs are there. I like this because it's very modular. Like we can take things away, we can put more things into it. So at work, we have regular meetings, daily stand-ups. We are talking to Scrum Masters. And the word that will keep coming up is agile. Like, what can we deliver today, not tomorrow? What can we deliver this week, this sprint? And we do 2-week sprints. And when it comes to things like in-place upgrade task sequences, we talk about all those additional complexity, all those additional steps for BIOS, applications, etc. I compare it a little bit to like, well, a bit like an MOT on a car. So we've done all this work, we've created all these steps, we've done all this testing, and finally, we've got all the latest BIOS packages, we've customized the media, we've got it fully up to date for this month, we've got the applications right, and now all the critical apps will be updated. And then we can start our testing. Now, the testing might take a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. You know, you need to get feedback, you need to get buy-in from the business. By the 4th week, you're probably into the next month. So now your OS media is out of date. You need to update the media. Maybe there's a new BIOS package, and you kind of have to start again. So when I was looking at servicing in our environment, I wanted to look at what's the minimum viable product that we can deliver. And since we're talking about branching, I just wanted to concentrate solely on the branching. We originally started with the in-place upgrade task sequence, and it was quite a complex process, as I described. And not only would it start with the wrappers or the GUIs that we had at the beginning, it was taking the user out of action. They weren't able to work. Once it started, they weren't able to work. And the process with all the complexity, we're looking at 1 hour to 2 hours of downtime. That's more than a lunchtime break. And in my environment, we have about 11,000 plus devices. And we're trying to keep the deployment process as simple as possible. And really, we want to keep the process so simple, users might not even know it's happening, if that's even possible. So this is why I was looking at the servicing node within Config Manager. And it's something I really like a lot. So if we just look at some numbers, I was at the Microsoft tour last week, and I can't remember the speaker's name, but I made a note of the numbers that he had on there. And he was saying 2.5 billion feature updates since 2015, 900 million Windows 10 devices, 300 upgrades every second, continuously. So Microsoft is very good at the servicing. They're very good. They know what they're doing. And all this information from all these environments is being fed back to Microsoft via telemetry. So it's building a lot of confidence into the success factor of getting them to the next branch. So we talk about the agile process. We're just doing one thing now. Well, one primary thing, should I say, which is to update the branch. But there might be just a few little customizations. There might be a few little things that you need to do. In our case, because of our environment, we need to overlay the wallpapers, the default wallpaper images. We need to customize the start menu layouts, and there's certain apps that we are suppressing. Now, our environment has evolved over a number of years, and different IT have got involved. So there are just a few customizations we need, but once we've applied them, we don't want to hard set them. So we can't set these in group policy. We can't hard set them in any other way. We just want an out-of-box default for a new user. But then they might want to change it. So they might want to change their application association to Edge from Chrome, for example. Just the nature of my environment, we can't enforce anything on anybody. And the other good thing about servicing is the need to maintain the media. So if I start it today and I test it, next month, obviously there's a new cumulative update. If I deploy the servicing, it's going to download the main payload for that branch. Then it will also pull down the cumulative updates, servicing stack updates to ensure that the update succeeds. Now, with peer caching, branch caching, and delivery optimization, this isn't putting a load on our network. I'm not getting calls from our network guys complaining. Process is very consistent, and I'm loving it. So I mentioned the customizations. Just a few customizations that I'm trying to keep, even with the servicing. So there's a setup command line option, and if we look at the top here, see users, default, app data, local, Microsoft, Windows, and then there's a WSUS folder, which isn't there by default. And then there's a setup config ini file, which isn't there by default. And if you create them, when you run an in-place upgrade task sequence media, or you run an upgrade via servicing, it's going to look in this directory, and it will read the setup config ini file, and it will pass whatever switches it has inside it to the command line. So if you look in the setup ACT log, you'll see that it's actually been amended with a post out-of-box experience command. So it's going to run the Windows update, followed by running this setup complete CMD file. Now I've placed the setup complete CMD file inside that OS config folder, just for tidiness. And then within the setup complete CMD file, it's calling some of these OS config scripts, the essential scripts that I need to keep. So in my case, I'm calling start menu layout, wallpapers, background, and I am uninstalling a MSI. That's all I need to do to get it to the other side. It's now going to be on the next branch. Everything's going to be consistent, and I've done my few customizations. So, I mentioned earlier our environment. It's gone through a number of engineers. There's a number of chefs that have been out there. So you can imagine the build has evolved over a period of time. Some of these machines out there on 1709 have never been serviced. It's just there's been so much time. They haven't been serviced, but they have got slightly different things embedded on them. So I've created a baseline in order to ensure that this servicing upgrade completes correctly. So I've got a config manager baseline that it's creating, it's checking for the existence of the setup config ini file, which will apply those out-of-box experience switches. It's also looking for my start layout PowerShell script, my background PowerShell script, which is part of that OS config file. And it's also creating a stamp to say that it's ran this compliance check. And it's also creating a whole host of registry keys to deprovision apps. So there might be some apps that we don't want installed as part of the user logging in, but we don't want to completely uninstall them from the OS itself in case we need to put them back at a later date. So we're just deprovisioning them via a registry key. And I'll show you that in a second when I bring out the demo. Now, in addition to this baseline, that setup config ini file, I mentioned the directory and the file don't exist out the box. So if it doesn't exist, we need to remediate that. Now, you could remediate that with a number of steps. You could push it out as a package and just have a copy command, and it would copy it over. But what I'm doing is I'm using a baseline that will not only create the file, but it also create the content that you want within it. So today we want to remove those, we want to apply those two PowerShell scripts and remove an MSI. But tomorrow we won't want to change that. Now, rather than create a new package, distribute it out, we can just update the baseline. And once the baseline is compliant, it's ready to go. So for a machine to be compliant, it has to run our baseline. But we're also using the telemetry data that Microsoft is providing us through Upgrade Analytics or soon to be, we need to upgrade it to desktop analytics. So Microsoft is saying it's got the right firmware, drivers, applications, it's ready to go from our perspective. And on our side, we're saying we've got all the prerequisites. So we put those two together and we create a list of machines that we want to target. Right. Just quickly delete this. So this is the script that I've written, and what we're doing here is we're setting a number of variables at the top. We've got the priority variable, we have the setup config, setup complete CMD file, and the scripts. And if we run this PowerShell, which is being run as the remediation on the config manager baseline, you can see here that it's just created this setup config ini file. Hopefully that's clear. It's updated it with the contents. So we can easily and quickly change the contents of the setup config ini file. And the setup config ini file is calling the setup complete CMD file, in which we're running our customizations. So finally, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the reporting. Now, I've blurred out a few of the some sensitive information on here, but what I'm intending to do is make this available for everybody to consume. And on the left-hand side, I've got a data set that's looking for collections that are prefixed with OU. Now, you could change this to be whatever you wanted it to be, and ideally, I'm going to create a filter, so you could input your filter. But each collection is dynamically generated based on the machines that were in that OU. So I can easily look at finance, HR, et cetera, and then identify what version of Windows is within that OU. So we've got a total number, but we've also got it broken up into the branches. And so you can target your out-of-date versions. Now, in our case, there are some 1607s. We are working quite hard on the 1709s. As you know, that it's going end of life in April. But this is a report that I'm looking at and working with teams almost daily on. We have a weekly service review call. This comes up as a sort of high-level number just for upper management to understand, are we compliant, are we maintaining compliance? But from a local level, I'm able to work with the second-line teams so they can go out and we can target specific departments. We can target specific users. We can find out if there's a particular model that's not updating. We can find out the actual user who owns that model. And as you can imagine, working in a school which has multiple campuses across London, just finding the machines can be quite a chore. And this is the sort of report that helps us target exactly where we should put in our attention. So I'm going to be making this available. And it'd be great to get some feedback on this. One thing I would like to mention is the in-place upgrade task sequence. Originally, we did look at this, and I've talked about the complexity, and I've talked a little bit about the amount of time it takes the users out of action. Now, using the servicing with the customizations and the OS config scripts, the user's actually working away with unaware that we're actually started the in-place upgrade process. Now, the only notification the users get is for that reboot. And once it gets to that reboot, they have a massive window in which they can complete it. And typically, a lot of the machines, they've all got solid-state drives, they've all got box standard applications. We are, in fact, averaging probably about 15, 20 minutes of downtime, which is very realistic within a lunch break. So users are scheduling, waiting until their lunch, clicking reboot, and then going off. If they delay, it will happen later that day. We've also rolled it out to workstations that we know are they haven't got a primary user, but they are on nearly all the time. So they're just happening in the evenings during maintenance windows. But the key thing, and the key thing that I've got a lot of good feedback for, is just the amount of downtime is very minimal. Originally, we had quite a lot of negative feedback in terms of I don't know what my machine's doing. It's got this curtain, this progress bar. I told it to start last night, but it didn't. It looks like it hasn't worked. It was generating a lot of tickets for the relative amount of deployments that we were making. Now, with the servicing, we've done over 5,000. I'd have to check the actual numbers. Over 5,000 in the last 5 months, and I got 0 tickets relating to the servicing failing. Now, we might know it didn't update, and that's more client health, or there might be more something more localized to boundary groups, in terms of getting content. But the actual upgrade, on the whole, has completed, and as I say, no tickets is good, considering the size of our teams of 5.
If it helps, exactly the same experience.
Yeah.
And we've done 180,000 updates through ours now, through 2 integrations using feature updates. User experience from our users is exactly what you're saying. They're basically saying, look, I'm without my machine 15, 20 minutes. And even if it goes wrong and it rolls back, we've seen 0 issues with it. Even if it has to roll back, it's rolled back. And the user's only lost 15, 20 minutes rather than losing an hour and a half, 2 hours, and then it rolling back afterwards as well.
It's quite interesting to hear you talk about like 100,000 devices, because I'm talking about 10,000, which is still a lot. But I still remember working in like early parts of my career. We were talking about 300, 400, 500 devices, and it's all about confidence. So you've got must have a lot of confidence in the process, because you're dealing with so many machines. Your pilot groups could easily encompass my whole environment, but I have a lot of confidence in this process, which means I can sell it to anyone I talk to. Especially upper management, my boss, he needs to know that when I'm pushing this out, we're not going to get 1,000 tickets. We're not going to get 1,000 BitLocker recovery key requests. We're not going to have to run overtime in order to remediate any actions. So I was just going to finish it up there. Are there any questions relating to what I've said? Yes? Oh, sorry. Or the microphone's down here, shall we?
You spoke about as well piloting. Have you got a ring solution in place to allow rattling through certain groups of, let's say, test devices first, or are you using the update analytics to choose those?
That's something we're not doing, and it's definitely on my list. With the desktop analytics, you have the ability to create deployment plans, and it will obviously look at all the machines in your estate and create the most appropriate pilot groups for it. But at the moment, we've got a number of pilot groups that we've selected, which I know is not ideal, but we we had to start somewhere with it.
We're the same.
Yeah.
Actually, we allow our users to choose to come into our
Yeah.
pilot groups, but no, we're the same.
Yeah.
They normally with that. I mean, when we're talking 2,500 in one of our pilot groups, normally you're going to find you get a spread of machines in that 2,500 anyway, a spread of systems, and a good spread of the software anyway. But again, I mean, we've just started down the desktop analytics route as well.
Okay.
Okay.
So there's a question at the back there.
Hello. I really want to get away from task sequences, but what I really like about them is that I can do a query on all status message results on any steps, any clients over a period of time. When one struggles via servicing, how do you find out, if any, how many, what scale, what they were, what the reason was, rather than just running these
I
Windows
think,
10 version numbers weekly?
I think for us it's a bit of a trade-off because, as I said, we've got quite a small team to the number of devices, and there's quite a number of challenges. So with the servicing, we might not be able to get everything that we could possibly get out of a task sequence, but we are seeing success. So to me, it's a bit of a trade-off, but we're putting the success a little bit further, putting it more as a requirement.
So how do you report on ones that struggle
How do I
to
what, sorry?
upgrade?
Can you repeat that, sorry?
How do you report on clients that struggle to upgrade with the servicing model? Or do you? Maybe you don't. Without desktop analytics, that is. I think there's ways with DA, right? Yeah. But without DA, is there a way?
So as an idea, one of the things we're currently looking at implementing is actually something that runs the diagnostics at the end of a failed installation. So because we know they failed, it will actually report that they failed. We can actually push those clients into a collection and actually have a package in there that runs the setup diagnostics. Right? It's going to run, you can actually then do one of two things. You can log the results of that into the registry and collect the registry keys to find out what went wrong. Or the alternative actually is if you want the more in-depth logs, you can actually go and work on a way in which it will actually push those logs to a central location, or you use something like log analytics to actually collect those logs in, so you can actually do some proper analytics on those logs. But that's the kind of thing that I would be looking at. Now, one thing I would say is that we spoke to Microsoft about 6 months ago about developments that are coming in Configuration Manager, and they are looking for the ideas like that. How do we get good results from the analytics side? How do we get good results from, say, a failed upgrade? So I know that they're already looking at this, and this will be on their roadmap, I'd hope.
Thank you. Hi there.
Hi.
I was looking at a screenshot where you have your operating systems and you have your OUs in a table. Yeah. What are the OUs? What do they represent?
So I've created a number of collections, and those collections are query-based, and they're actually looking at the OUs within Active Directory. So if you're a member of that OU, it's going to be populated into that collection. And then my data set is looking for certain characteristics that are based on those OUs.
Have you found it necessary to create an application portfolio and to target your servicing models based upon problem apps?
I think this is where we're in the very early stages of it. So I want to get to the desktop analytics in order to target all of these apps that are, or all the machines that are considered non-compliant. But this is our struggle. This is why I've come to these events to talk to people.
Sorry, I'm not trying to give you hard questions.
No.
I mean, I'm in the middle of creating a servicing model for one of my customers, and one of the things I'm putting together is application portfolio and also a model portfolio, so I could work for the drivers. And then what I'm probably thinking of doing is segregating all the business critical. It's the NHS, okay? So all the business critical apps, anything that we're going to get shot for if they don't upgrade. And for the deployment rings, for the start in the testing of deployment rings, I'm thinking maybe put one of everything that could be a problem within that first initial test.
What I should have mentioned is we're also partaking in Cyber Essentials. So there's a requirement to have apps, critical apps, vulnerable apps patched. So we have actually implemented Patch My PC to take care of 335 applications, I think it is. So this will cover things like Oracle, Adobe, all the big offenders. So we are using the update model for Patch My PC in order to target the apps. We're also using Dell third-party drivers, or third-party cabs, shall I say, the driver packs in order to target the drivers of these machines.
I would say as well, what we've done to get around this, exactly what you're saying, is we have a headline collection that is puts you into servicing, but then as well as that, we have an exclude collection against that. Now, that exclude collection, when we release certain versions, and we have the different one for each version of Windows that we're pushing out at any time, could be only normally up to 2 versions in our environment. And within that, because those 2 exclude collections are sitting there, we will actually drop the applications that we have seen through our testing that are actually not compatible at the moment. So ones that we've got at the moment, I mean, definitely McAfee always causes us a problem with upgrades. And then the other one is VMware just recently. So we actually dropped the fact that those machines that have got these applications should be excluded until they've upgraded. And then we deploy the upgrades actually to that collection as well. And we make sure that gets forced. The only other thing I would say is you will notice that as that goes along, you're going to see more and more and more upgrades just complete without any extra remedial work. I think finally the software vendors are getting this. And they are tending to actually now supply applications that do not need upgrade, or we do not need to upgrade every single new version of Windows, unless you're McAfee.
One at the back.
Yeah, as part of the servicing options in Config Manager, do you use the dynamic updates to apply dynamic updates as part?
So the answer is yes. It will pull down these. You're talking about servicing stack updates, dynamic updates. So it's got the OEM drivers in there, the additional patching in order to service the one branch to the next. So that we're just allowing it to download. And as part of the delivery optimization, the peer caching I mentioned, we're not seeing any issues on a network level.
So you're seeing delivery optimization actually working?
I've seen it working, yeah.
Yeah, all right, yeah, because we have a call open with Microsoft and there seems to be a difference of opinion on the comments coming back from Microsoft whether the delivery optimization was working with dynamic updates. From yourselves, it seemed like it's working. So, yeah.
I'd say if not, branch cache is going to be working anyway. Use all your caching options.
Yeah.
Don't just use one.
I was going to ask that, yeah. I was going to
Yeah.
ask which ones. Branch cache, delivery optimization, peer cache.
We've got all 3.
Bits.
Yeah, we've got them all. We've got them all.
All 3 are there for a reason, because if one's not working, you'll find the other one is.
I've got an extra question, staged by Rob. Do you deal with any multiple languages at all, or just English?
The OS is English.
Okay.
We've integrated a number of proofing tools for Office 365, and that's about where we are
Okay.
for the languages.
I know languages is a challenge for
Yeah.
a number of people. I don't know if anyone else in here has got that same kind of challenge with languages, dealing with different language experience packs and things. Yeah. Any more?
Yeah, we have about 15 language packs delivered across our clients, but from what we've seen from our initial testing is that those language packs seem to now be preserved. In the past they weren't, but now they are, and even on the features on demand as well, they seem to now be preserved as well. So Microsoft seems to have done a good job there.
It took them a long time.
Yes.
Any more for any more? If
Just
not,
a quick question for you, actually. Are you using the automatic deployment rules?
Not for Windows 10 servicing. No.
Okay.
No.
You're
We
in
are.
the same situation as us then.
Yeah.
We were using the automatic deployment rules, but we actually scaled that back purely because when it runs the rules, we can't guarantee what time it's going to actually install the OS at.
Yeah.
Our users are very much used to it's going to install it on a given day of the week and at a given time. And anything that deviates away from that suddenly gets them being very worried about what we're doing to their system. So hence we've moved away from the automatic deployment rules ourselves.
I might get your details after this.
Yeah.
Pick your brain.
I do have. Who's asking? Me again causing trouble.
Sorry about this. I don't want to cause you any trouble. Another question is your servicing channels. I know some customers want to stick just with the SAC-T channel and use that throughout. That way you're getting it early and use it throughout the entire cycle. Are you starting with insider bills, moving to SAC-T and then moving to SAC, or are you just sticking with?
So we're sticking with the business channel, the 30 months supported channel. I don't think, is it still called SAC-T now? Is it just not
There is
semi-on channel?
no SAC-T anymore.
Yeah.
You basically key
They've
off.
SAC-T off.
Yeah, SAC-T is off, yeah. Basically, there is no concept anymore of SAC-T. What you will see within the console, particularly with servicing, is normally you'll see two releases go in there. You'll see the initial release. So, for instance, you'll see a 1903, and then you'll see a 1903 update come in later on. Normally, I think it was coming under the business update as well at one stage, I think with 1903, and I think they may have even canned that with 1909. Now, if you're using automatic deployment rules, the key will be to actually key your dates of when they get deployed off of the actual key release are normally fine. So go for something like, say, I'm going to go 6 months in advance. So I'm going to wait 6 months before that's released, or I'm going to wait 3 months before that's released. But there is no SAC-T anymore.
So in terms of piloting or insiders, we don't use any of the insider channels or the beta channels or anything like that. As soon as it's released, though, like generally available release, we'll obviously download it, and we've got our internalized, insiders group. It's not an insider build, but it's an insider deployment, so we can fully assess it, make sure we understand the experience before we start pushing it out.
Sorry, I thought I was out of questions, but I've got another one. Are you users testing on their actual primary devices, or do they have secondary devices and virtual machines?
So in terms of this insider group that I'm describing, this piloting insider group, it is on their primary machines. They're not very precious of the machines. They would just rebuild them if there was any problems. Obviously, I wouldn't expect someone in finance to have that same attitude. I'm talking about second line, first line IT guys. So they don't keep anything that's not backed up in OneDrive for Business. Yeah. Okay, shall I wrap it up there? Thank you very much.